Bills Mafia, what's going on? Tonight, we are talking about the 53-man roster, our projections, what we think, and how things are going to shake up. Let's get it. Bills Mafia, what is going on tonight? How are we doing? Welcome. Happy Thursday. I hope your day was good. Beautiful weather out there. A lot to look forward to. Welcome to this week's episode of Buffalo Late Night on the Cover One Sports Network. We got a jam-packed show, literally. This might take all night. We'll try to keep it as short as possible. I am your host, Thomas DeLoss. I'm glad that you've chosen to hang out with us this evening. Again, thank you for tuning in tonight, or if you are listening on Spotify, happy Friday to you. You can find our show free on all social media and streaming platforms, including Spotify and YouTube, or however you choose to pod. If you are watching on Twitter right now, hop on over to our YouTube page, join and be a part of this conversation. It's going to be a good one, I promise. Also, want to make sure you hit that subscribe button on our YouTube page and hit that notification button. That's going to let you know every time any one of our Cover One shows goes live. If you want to join us, it's going to be good. Super chats are open for this show and every Cover One show. So if you want to be heard, just click that button. You can tell us who you think is going to make the 53-man roster. Now, again, I've got some exciting news. I've said this for a few weeks, and these contests are about to wrap up. I got two fantastic giveaways going on right now on my Twitter page, The first one's pinned at the top. That is, I'm giving away a couple Buffalo Bills tickets for both a regular season and a preseason game. And also, I'm giving away a copy of Madden 24. Make sure you go hit that follow button on my Twitter. It's the Thomas DeLoss. Try to get yourself some free stuff. Everybody loves free stuff. And again, we are now officially 1 week away from Buffalo Bills training camp. Literally this time next week, we are going to be getting right into it, right into the nitty gritty, when everybody loves to see their favorite players, their favorite rookies, everybody kind of vying for their spot on the Buffalo Bills 53-man roster. So make sure you are subscribed to Cover One, as well as the Cover One One Pass, for all the best coverage and analysis heading into training camp. Also, guys, we are going to be at training camp the 26th, which is the first practice. We will be there. The Cover One crew will be there. Make sure you join us. Make sure you come up and say hello. We would love to meet you. Tonight, we have a loaded show for you. We've got two fantastic people. The first is one of the many talented individuals from BuffaloPlus, as well as Wham 13 Rochester, Miss Jenna Cottrell, and from the Batavia News, Mr. Alex Brasky. Guys, how are we doing?
Hello. Thank you for having us.
What's up, guys?
I'm glad we were able to connect tonight. We have a lot to get into. We have a very exciting week ahead, kind of getting our minds right in preparation for a very, very interesting Bills training camp. One that, you know, is time for Brandon Beane to set the record straight. Both Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott getting their extensions. And now we're going to see the rubber meets the road, where they put a roster that is potentially Super Bowl bound. So, guys, what are you thinking about heading into training camp this week?
Jenna, go ahead. You first.
I think for us, it's just kind of seeing the team out there on the field. Like, this is kind of the inkling of how the season starts. And in terms of the expectations, you know, it's Super Bowl once again. I kind of just like getting out there and just seeing, for one, how the team interacts with one another. I think, you know, the Stephon Diggs, Josh Allen, I think I'm curious to see if we'll hear from Stephon Diggs. But I think this is really kind of like setting the foundation of the season. And then also just the fact that it's training camp in Rochester. Always love seeing the fans out there. And I love how close the fans can be and that experience that it offers to the fans as well.
Yeah, I'm sure this is Jenna's favorite time of year. only has to drive probably 10, 15 minutes to work as opposed to an hour and a half or whatever it is. So.
Yeah, can't beat the commute. I'm not gonna lie.
It's certainly a positive time of year for her, but I think she hit the nail on the head. I think we're all looking forward to just getting out there, getting off social media talk and all the hot button issues, and getting out there watching football, seeing the team come together, see some of the positional battles play out, and of course, hopefully hearing from Stephon Diggs. We didn't hear from him all off season with all the drama that took place, kind of self-created, I should say. Some blame the media, some blame the players in the organization. We don't have to get into all that, but a little self-created drama there that kind of looking to put that by the wayside and move forward into real football season.
Yeah, by the way, Alex, you got a touch of an echo in your mic, just to let you know. We do have some, big storylines heading into training camp, some really tightly contested battles. And, I was on my way back from Utica this afternoon. I was kind of telling my wife what we were looking at, and there's not a lot of wiggle room. This roster is damn near complete. And so the 51st, 52nd, 53rd roster spot are going to come down to potential fringe guys, roster guys that are fighting, and rookies. So it should be very, very interesting. Before we get into that, Ian, let's go ahead and hit that damn segment. Damn! Tonight's Sam Award recipient currently belongs to the Minnesota Vikings, but potentially not for much longer. Rookie receiver Jordan Addison has had an eventful 24 hours after catching a reckless driving charge in his brand new Lamborghini Urus, doing 140 miles an hour in a 55 at 3 a.m. this past morning. Before playing a down of professional football, the 23rd pick in the 2023 draft not only bought himself a Lamborghini, but also succumbed to the urge to test it out on public roads. Vikings rookie training camp begins next week, and the big question coming out of Minnesota is whether or not we'll see Addison practicing. Despite the speed and the ticket, the state of Minnesota has relatively lax punishments for reckless driving, and with the amount of money at the disposal of Mr. Addison, is likely that very little will come out of this infraction. Despite that, we here at Buffalo late night, tip our cat to Jordan Addison. Reckless, dangerous, and frankly stupid driving habits award him this week's damn trophy. Sending it anyway. We are really, really interested to see how this is going to transpire. I loved Greg Thompson's comment earlier. Questions about his speed came into question during Combine and his draft perspective. Now we really know why. Guys, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I talked with Gene Bataglia on the Fan Rochester earlier. He asked me this question, how fast I'd ever driven in a car. I think I'm about 85, 90, somewhere in that range, but I was in the back seat for a 110 mile an hour experience, and that was one of the most terrifying moments in my entire life. So not really sure what he was thinking, but I did have him as the top most favorable candidate for the Bills coming out of the draft in the first round. So it shows you kind of my judge of character there.
I will say, I guess maybe I've driven way too fast. I've definitely gone 100 when I was younger. You don't even realize it though. You don't realize it. So I think probably 100, but you quickly are on the highway, the expressway on the 90, and you're like, oh, okay, we need to chill out. I might have a bit of a lead foot. I'm not like that anymore though. I drive. I feel like my parents are watching or something.
Jenna's late to a practice. She's putting pedal to the metal out here.
So Dan Fates does all the driving. I am a passenger princess on the way to Orchard Park, and I think it's because of my driving. So I let Dan take that.
I love how you say you don't notice you're going 100.
You don't. Because you're not really. That's the.
I don't know what kind of car.
If only they made something that told you how fast you were going.
Yeah, that's why
Jenna's driving the Indy car to practice.
I will say I drove 90 on the way home here. Did not hit 100, but I did know I was driving 90. But Jenna, it's okay. It's okay.
We forgive you.
That being said, obviously, guys, the big topic tonight, we're going to get right into it because this could take a bit. We are talking about the 53-man roster for the Buffalo Bills. Like I've said before, this roster is one that for a number of years now has kind of already been in place. The big thing going into not only the draft, but free agency is it's incredibly difficult to make the Bills roster. Just because, one, there's a ton of vested veterans. They have a core group of people that they're building around, and there's not a lot of wiggle room. And in this specific 53-man roster, it's the same. If you break down the entire roster of 90 people, it's going to be really hard for these guys that are coming in to make the roster. And they're going to really have to usurp some of these guys that have been here for a number of years. So that being said, let's get right into tonight's roster projection. We are going to start off right at the top, right at the number one position that everybody knows about, our quarterbacks room. Obviously, we have three quarterbacks in our quarterback room: Josh Allen, Kyle Allen, and Matt Barkley. I think it's pretty obvious and easy to say we can move quite quickly past this, with Josh Allen and Kyle Allen probably making the 53-man roster, and Matt Barkley more than likely ending up on the practice squad, correct?
Yeah, I think that's pretty standard. Allen and Allen will be out there for the Bills. Hopefully Kyle Allen is not anywhere out there, but yeah, I think that's a pretty locked up position group in terms of that.
Right. If we see Kyle Allen out there, we might be in a little bit of trouble. But
yeah, no, nobody wants to see him out there.
I think that group is as locked up as the specialist, but it's late. Maybe I'm forecasting now.
Potentially. Obviously, next we are heading into our running back room. This is going to be one that's going to be interesting. We had Latavius Murray and Latavius Murray and Damian Harris brought in this offseason. Bills fans should be very familiar with Damian Harris, as he has been unbelievable playing against the Buffalo Bills in the 3 or 4 different occurrences over the years with the Patriots. And then Latavius Murray, a Central New York guy who has been really a revelation at 33 years old. With these 5 guys, who are we thinking right now that's going to make the roster? Do you guys have any interesting takes amongst this?
I would say what stuck out to me is Damian Harris. You know, when he was signing with the Bills, he talked about how Buffalo brought the best out of him. You know, as an opponent, he felt like he really played his best game against them. And, you know, the stats back up his production against Buffalo and how he expects that to translate to now being on the team. I think, you know, he's 26, but I think he can add a lot. And I think that's someone I'm really looking forward to seeing out there on the field. And then Latavius Murray, he's old, but he can still find the end zone. And for him to kind of add that muscle, I'm curious to see how that will look in terms of the Bills. And then I don't know about you, Alex, but Nyheim Hines, I'm just curious how he does fit in with this Bills team, and if Buffalo can really find a more structured role even in the offense this upcoming season.
Right. I think we'll learn a lot about that during training camp. I think he's still a candidate to be cut. I think the Bills save about $2 million if they cut Nyheim Hines before a certain date. But you're spot on with Damian Harris. I'm really excited to see him in this offense, running plays with Josh Allen. I think he'll be able to do a lot more than what is expected of him maybe coming into Buffalo. Really looked at as a bruising back, but I think there's more to be had from Damian Harris. I think he has more capability of just a 5 yards and 4 yards in a cloud of dust type player. I think he's a bit more versatile than that. I think we'll see him on the field complimenting James Cook to start the season, barring an injury here during training camp. And Latavius Murray is just like an NFL cockroach. He just will not go away. I don't know how – I forget how old he is. I know he's over 30 years old, but
he's going to be 33.
There you go. I mean, it must be that New York blood or whatever we got in the water up here. But it's really impressive to just see the longevity of his career and the way he's stuck around. And he continues to produce whenever given the opportunity.
And I do think it is something to note, too, going off that. Murray can offer that size as well. He's 6'3". He's got that bigger frame. And when you look at a lot of these other guys, I mean, they are about the same. And then I do think we should know the fact that Devin Singletary is gone. He has been the Bills' leading rusher. He has been a part of the team since he was drafted in 2019. I think for Bills fans, Devin Singletary was incredibly consistent. Maybe they wanted more out of him. But you knew what you were going to get with Singletary. And now that he is not with the team, he's down with the Texans. I think it leads the opportunity for, James Cook and who else will kind of be there to kind of split the carries with that.
Yeah, definitely interested to see how James Cook acclimates himself to that RB1 role. He's going to have to do a lot more pass blocking. Didn't have many opportunities in that regard last year, and for good reason. Just frankly, he wasn't very good at it. But that's kind of a learned skill in the NFL. College running backs aren't asked to pass block very often. So A lot to be expected of him, a lot to be expected of Harris, and we'll see what they do with Hines.
Yeah, and I mean this. You're talking about one of potentially the most talented backfields the Bills have had in a number of years. If Damian Harris can stay healthy, he's been a machine for most of his
Yeah.
career back to Alabama. Latavius Murray has proven he's still got a lot of juice, and he can take some of that, kind of burden off of Josh Allen once we get into the red zone. And James Cook, a guy that I think that, people need to talk more about. He had almost the exact stat line as Brees Hall, who was the offensive rookie of the year prior to going down with an ACL injury. And the only difference is that James Cook's numbers were spread over 18 games and not over the first 7 weeks of the season, like Brees Hall. Had James Cook had more of a dominant role, 18 to 20 carries a game, we may have seen a more prolific guy, which I think we might see this season. So,
and we will see if he can handle that workload as a second-year player who, even in college, he was kind of a split-time running back. We'll see if he can really handle that load as a full-time running back. That'll be intriguing.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a lot of fun, a good group, and finally that thunder and lightning that we didn't have with Zach Moss and Devin Singletary. So this will be good. The next one that we're going to be talking about is our wide receivers group. This is going to be one that I think a lot of people are going to be keeping a very, very close eye on. Obviously, your main guys, Stephon Diggs, Gabriel Davis, those are your two. Mm-hmm. Deontay Hardy is a guy that was really a premium free agent pickup for the Bills, one that they paid a good amount of money to actually come to Buffalo. Trent Sherfield, the number one blocking wide receiver last year. And then guys like Khalil Shakir, who never really got an opportunity or was very limited in that, and a bunch of kind of in the middle guys, and Justin Shorter, a draft pick. So is there guys outside of the top four, I think, that are standing out that you believe could make a vie for this roster?
Alex, you can start.
No, I think it's pretty locked in. I think Diggs, Davis, Hardy, Sherfield, and Shorter are pretty much locks, barring injury or barring. I would honestly say only an injury would supplant one of those guys as in a roster spot. I think you bring in Sherfield, you bring in Hardy and Shakir coming back in this system, and Shorter being drafted. I don't see any path where any of those guys don't make the roster, and I'm really excited to see what Hardy and Sherfield have to do. Particularly Hardy, I think he's got a higher upside. Maybe Sherfield a bit more steady of a force in an offense. Like you mentioned, his ability is run blocker, excuse me. But I'm really excited to see what Hardy can do with the ball in his hands and run after the catch and whatnot.
I'm excited for Hardy just because how much we've heard about him from other Bills players. Like Josh Allen can't stop talking about how fast Deontay Hardy is. And that is something that is intriguing for this Bills offense, that take the top off the defense type of speed, that ability to get open, all that stuff. So I'm curious how that will be. I agree with Alex, though. I think it's a pretty locked up group. We'll say Khalil Shakir is someone I'm really looking towards this season. Can he, he had some rookie moments last year, but he also made some big catches. Can he continue to build off of that? And then also Gabriel Davis. I mean, he had the ankle injury. That issue seemed lingering. It nagged him all last season, really. Can he kind of, he had a sophomore slump. Can he get back to what Bills fans have expected from him? Because we talk about, this Bills receiving core and the talent and all this stuff. And it's great, but you look around the AFC and you just see how stacked other teams are. You're going to have guys other than Stephon Diggs be a reliable target. And can this group do that? I think they can, but I'm curious to see what will happen down the line.
Yeah, this wide receiver group that we have, and I do agree the top 6 are pretty much at this point locked into place. So it'll be interesting to see what the battles look like. They present different matchups. The one thing that I think a lot of people looked at with the Bills is there were a lot of small guys. There wasn't a whole lot of size. There wasn't a lot of versatility. And when you saw after Jake Kumaro went down, the Bills were in trouble. They had nobody they could flex out to the boundary. Mm-hmm. They couldn't flex any of, Gabriel Davis or Stephon Diggs to the slot. And they didn't really have any slot because Jamison Crowder got injured. Isaiah McKenzie obviously couldn't do much. So now you have a bunch of guys that they can work in and out. And that allows Ken Dorsey to truly get creative and open up his playbook and potentially show what he wanted to show last year until, maybe week 3 when things kind of got a little, I would say, tenuous for him when he didn't have as much, of an arsenal to it. Now moving on, we got one with our number 1 draft pick, Dalton Kincaid, our tight ends group. I think this is one, personally, I only have 2 tight ends making the roster. I know Quentin Morris showed some stuff last year. I think it's only going to be Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid. I think there's a bunch of other position groups that are going to be kind of thick with numbers, that it's going to be one of these, this position group that's going to be cut real tight. I don't know how you guys are feeling. I don't know if you think Quentin Morris has a chance.
Yeah, I do have Morris making the roster simply due to his special teams ability. He was a key contributor and looks to be a key contributor moving forward within their special teams, but he's not going to see much time barring injury, with Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid eating up much of the snaps, and Kincaid even seeing some time split out as a pseudo wide receiver. So I think Morris makes the roster, but I don't think you're totally off base with the consideration that he might not.
Yeah, I think the same way. Like, if he's cut, I'm not surprised, but also if he makes it, I'm also not surprised. Like, I think the Bills really value what Quentin Morris can be, and I think he adds a little security as well. But that being said, the Bills have a lot of tough decisions to make, and maybe that means Morris being cut.
And it'll be exciting this year. I mean, Dalton Kincaid, I think, is something that a lot of people have talked about in terms of, is he a weapon? Is he a tight end?
Yeah.
Where the draw line is there. But I will say, this is a potential of, a very dynamic weapon group, because, we talked about the wide receivers. We talked about the running backs. I mean, what James Cook can do. Damian Harris and Latavius Murray can also catch the ball out of the backfield and in the flat. And then you have guys like Dalton Kincaid, who can not only stretch the ball or the field vertically, but can also go in line, go in the seam, can run a slot. There's so many different things that they can really present as mismatches, that now the Bills have the ability to get creative and kind of be versatile, but on top of it, use the size, because you have a lot of guys. Justin Shorter, who's 6'5", Dalton Kincaid, 6'5", Dawson Knox is 6'4". I mean, a bunch of very big guys.
Yeah, I will say, I think looking at some of the comments, RJ brings up a good point. Like, if you want to run 2 tight end sets, you have to have multiple options in terms of tight end. You could count Reggie Gilliam in there and maybe cut Morris and then factor in Reggie Gilliam as another tight end. But the Bills do want to run a lot more of that this season. So I think I'm excited to see what that looks like, because I think we were all, I mean, Alex, you were in the draft room when they picked Kincaid, and we were all kind of like, oh, okay. Like, so that is something that I know Bills fans are probably very excited to see, and I'm looking forward to seeing how that works out on the field. And if Ken Dorsey can take advantage and all these things, and Dalton Kincaid can be the guy that he's been advertised as.
Right. I think that's the number one storyline going into training camp and the season, whether or not Ken Dorsey and Josh Allen, for that matter, can really make best use of all these guys that they've brought in all over on offense.
Yeah. I think Ken Dorsey's not on the hot seat, but I think his seat is warm.
Yeah, he definitely has a lot to prove this year. I think he does get a bit of, not a pass, but a little wiggle room, just surely based on the injuries, Josh Allen's arm. There was a lot that he just couldn't get over as in terms of hurdles. But I think, the fact, if you look at the numbers in general, where he was trending in the first couple of weeks, I mean, he was on a historic pace.
Yeah.
He was doing things that most people could never do as a rookie offensive coordinator. So it'd be intriguing to see how he's able to evolve. I mean, that was the big thing with Brian Daboll. There's a lot of recency bias with Brian Daboll, but there was a time when Bills fans wanted Brian Daboll fired just as quickly as they wanted Ken Dorsey fired. So I think Bills fans need to take a step back. I know it's easy to call for a coach's head and give Ken Dorsey his opportunity to prove that maybe last year was more of an outlier and not the fact of what he is going to be. So that being said, let's move on to the next position group, our offensive line group. A lot of names here.
So many names.
And some interesting ones at that. I'll tell you, I think we've got some big names that came in. Connor McGovern was a very, very nice signing for the Buffalo Bills, a guy that could potentially provide a more steadying hand where Roger Saffold kind of fell short. Osiris
Pro Bowler.
Right, Pro Bowler Roger Saffold.
That's right.
Sorry, I just love that. Just cracks me up.
Very meaningful, those selections nowadays.
And hey, even more than that, I don't know if you guys saw the American Gladiators documentary, but he's
Oh,
actually
loved
hanging
it.
out now with one of the American Gladiators as of recently. So at least he's
All right.
making his time worthwhile.
Love it.
Got the number one guard in the draft, Osiris Torrance, who a lot of people are very, very excited about. A guy that some people potentially think could start. I think that's very much in the cards. But we have a lot of great guys here that can be both swing tackles, guards, centers, left tackle, right tackle. There's so many things that they can do. What do you guys think in terms of this position group? And is there any names that stand out as a guy that will be maybe on the verge of making the roster or could push the 53?
Yeah, I think Nick Broker is going to be the odd man out here, and David Questenberry certainly has a upward battle to make the roster as well. You bring in a guy like Brandon Shell to potentially try to fill that swing tackle position that Questenberry tried to fill last year, but he was kind of battling through injury all season long, never really got his feet under him. And I think they bring in Shell. I think he's got the leg up in that circumstance. And then that right guard position is going to have a lot of guys vying for that opportunity. I mean, you got Bates, you got Butker, you got Edwards, who they brought in, and then you mentioned Torrance, all kind of battling it out for that position. And you're really looking for more out of Spencer Brown and Deion Dawkins. Not the best seasons last year, while Mitch Morse really stood out as a highlight. But I think the interior is going to be the key this season. You highlighted Connor McGovern with the significance of the contract that they gave him. I think he's got obviously a clear path to that left guard position, but that right guard spot, that's going to be a sticking point for them throughout training camp. And that battle might extend into the regular season. We've seen it before with Cody Ford rotating a bit back early in his career. So I think that could be a battle that extends into the regular season.
Yeah. Also, sorry if you can hear, there's like a crazy thunder and lightning storm. So I don't know if you guys can hear
it just passed through Batavia. So
okay. So yeah, it makes sense.
Our compliments.
It's going down the 90. So I apologize.
It'll be at my house very, very soon then, I guess.
I apologize if you guys can hear that. No, I think
that's why I had to shift locations. You're hearing echoes. I moved to a smaller room. Hopefully it's a little bit better, but now I'm holding my phone, so my arms are like falling asleep.
No, it does sound better, Alex.
Good.
I will say, I think the Bills did a good job of addressing the need out of offensive line. I don't know how that will play out in terms of the season, if they did fill that need like we all expected, but I think they did do a good job of addressing things. My concern, you talk about the interior, I also look at just Spencer Brown. Last season, sorry, that was so, did you hear that? It's so loud.
No, but that one is probably the one I heard about 20 minutes ago.
Oh my gosh. I'm really afraid of thunder and lightning. So I apologize.
We might lose Jenna.
I was gonna say sorry. I don't like loud noises.
Being a weather anchor was never in the cards for you.
Never. First of all, you have to do
you're
science.
Like Britt Tamlin or whatever his name is from Anchorman. Loud noises.
Loud noise. Yeah. I don't do well with loud, sudden noises. Okay, let me get back to it. Sorry, I have like a fly brain. But Spencer Brown, that the pressure will be on him, and I want to see what he can do. The Bills have made a ton of, I don't want to say excuses, but they've given him a ton of leeway. He had the injury last year, but can he really develop into the guy that the Bills expected him to be? And I don't know if there's, this thing of, the Bills had Wyatt Teller and they traded it away, and, they didn't wait enough time to see their asset develop and they ended up giving him away. I don't know if that plays into Brandon Beane's mind at all with that position, but this is going to be a huge season for Spencer Brown and what he can do, because you have, there's injuries. It was your rookie year, injuries, all this. It's like, no, this is put up or shut up time. And I think for the Bills, they love their guy, but this season will really play out and see where he will end up and what that will mean for the Bills offensive line, because you saw at the end of last year, Josh was bailing out of plays after a couple seconds because there wasn't that consistency, and it absolutely affected Buffalo's offense. And just, I think it got in Allen's head, and I can't say I blame him.
I was just going to say that. No doubt toward the end of the season, he just didn't trust it. He's bailing out of the pocket when pressure wasn't really even in his face. And I think it definitely contributed to the turnover struggles and just the overall downward trend of the offense down the stretch of the season. But if you look at the stats overall, I mean, they still rank pretty high in in all offensive categories, except for maybe turnovers. And then you add so much at wide receiver. You're hoping for more out of running back. This is the position that they desperately need to get right this season. And if you ask the Madden raters, they're not very high on this group. I think they have one over at 80, and that's Morse, and the rest of them are like in the 70s. So pretty rough.
I didn't see that.
Maybe I might not be totally accurate with that, but I know it's a pretty poor showing in terms of this group's Madden rankings. I don't have my computer with me. Somebody look that up if you get a chance.
Well, I'll say this much with Spencer Brown, it is definitely, if things don't work out, it is an indictment on Brandon Beane with the fact that, a lot of people thought going after a right tackle was really important. Knowing if Spencer Brown's back did not straighten itself back out and was not an injury, an injury that he could get past, having somebody behind him. And obviously they have Brandon Shell, but Brandon Shell was a free agent for a reason. So, he's not a guy that's potentially going to turn things over. Oh, there we go. Ian.
So embarrassing. Oh my God.
So
that
Jenna
looks
doesn't
like the
sudden
overhead
things.
shot.
That is why.
That
Now we
looks
know.
like the overhead shot of the Ali fight with the like standing over the guy, like sprawled on the ground.
Someone put the crying Jordan meme on my face, which hat tip.
God.
That was honestly hilarious.
You got the true treatment.
Yeah, oh my God.
But it'll be interesting to see how this grouping goes. And I think it's something that, it should be fun, but potentially as another group that Brandon Beane has bolstered, some really, really nice talent. And maybe we'll even see the Penn State connection with Ryan Bates and Connor McGovern again. But moving forward, we've got onto our defense. Our cornerback group, we are going to see the first year back of Tre'Davious White, full go, fully healthy. And from what everybody's saying, and, Jenna and Alex, you can speak to this, Trey looks good. Trey looks yoked. So tell me what you guys are thinking about this cornerback group. And is there any sneaky Jamarcus Ingram opportunities, or who could potentially make the roster?
I'm excited for Trey White. I will say I have a soft spot for Trey just because I think he's always been really good in terms of the media and just being very honest and upfront and just a really great guy to talk to. I also think he's hilarious, like him picking up the papers on the field. Like, how can you not? He's just that to me. I think I think that injury though, really, it was the first time he had a major injury, major surgery. I think that really, mentally hurt him even more than maybe physically. So this year, I think coming back, getting back into it, having another off season to prepare, I think that will be really huge for his psyche. And we all expect Trey White to be that guy, and myself included. And the Bills are also really hoping that will be the case. And when you talk about this other room of cornerbacks, it's like, we always talk about I think this guy's gone. And then I look at a name like Christian Benford. I mean, last year I would have been like, yeah, I don't think he makes it. He's a late round pick. What can he really prove? But I think there's always those question marks on the roster. And I'm excited to see who this season's those types of guys will be. But yeah, for the Bills, we talk about Christian Benford though. And then Alex, I'm like, man, if Kaiir Elam's not on the field, that's not a good look either though.
Right. I have that feeling with a few players, and we'll get to another player in a few moments, but he's one of them that I think the Bills desperately want him to win this job. He really seemed to take a step down the stretch of last season, and he didn't start the season, I think, as a starter. I think Benford came out of camp as the starter. And
Benford started in L.A. because I remember being like, oh, snap.
Right. Whatever he was, the late round pick starting at week 1 over the first rounder, I think was a little jarring, but Elam settled in, I think, down the stretch of the season. He found his footing, and I think they, at the very least, desperately want him to win this job. Obviously, he'll be given every opportunity, but they do love them some Dane Jackson, and they love them some consistent football. And Dane Jackson is as steady as they go. He's not going to blow you away, and there's some times where he'll just be physically overmatched, but he's always going to be in the right spot. He's going to fulfill his responsibility. And they really value that, especially at the defensive back position.
Can I just add something? I did It's Always Game Day and Buffalo podcast with Sal Capaccio and Matt Beauvais. And we were talking about the cornerback battle and who will be CB2 offset, who will be outside next to or across from Trey White. And I said Kyer. And then Matt was like, Beauvais was like, no, it's Christian Benford. And then Sal was like, whoa, wait, it's Dane Jackson. So that is something, that dynamic and that battle at camp, I think for fans will be really fun to watch because I think there's a lot of talent there and there's a lot of horses in that race. But that is something that I think for fans, they can definitely key into in terms of position battles.
And Stephon Diggs will be aware of these guys battling it out. You saw him get into it with some of the rookies last year. He's going to be all over these guys. He's going to be testing them every day out there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And hey, it's a good problem to have. I mean, if Trey is back, and even if he's 90% of Trey, and one thing I will speak to, and I'm not Tre'Davious White, so don't tweet me, don't take this video and use it. I've torn my ACL in both of my knees. I actually talked to Jenna about this.
Did you get them both repaired?
I did. I didn't do them at the same time. I did them like 5 years apart, but it's tough just doing everyday things, relearning how to just be comfortable again.
Adrian Peterson ruined it forever.
Right. He came back in like 3 months.
Yeah. And here's the thing. I'm not playing football for money because that's the thing is people have to think about with Trey. And like Jenna said, Trey didn't have an injury at LSU. He's been pretty much healthy his entire career. And for Trey, a guy that was, Sean McDermott's #1 pick, who holds that very, very close to his heart. Like him being Sean McDermott's first pick is incredibly important to him, and his legacy is everything in who he is to his children and all that. So for Trey, he wants to be on the field, everything he's been so far. And that injury, I think Jenna is spot on, was so detrimental to his psyche. You could see, I mean, we talked about it, and people even said, like, could he be back week 1 last year? And you could just tell, wow, that was really loud.
You got the weather now too?
I got it. Yeah. I think this is a battle that's going to be a lot of fun, but if Trey is back healthy, we haven't really, I mean, you had, all different random corners, whether it was Greg Gaines or EJ Gaines or the guy that got trucked by Derrick Henry. Josh Norman. Yeah, right. There's so many different guys. And we've never really had that pure CB2, a guy that everybody feared. Now we have the chance to have 3 potential very talented corners to be able to put opposite of Tre'Davious White, a luxury a lot of teams don't get to have. I think it's going to be a lot of fun and a group that people are really excited about. And there's some guys in there like Jamarcus Ingram, in short order in that Miami game, really stepped up. I mean, it was tough for him, but he did a hell of a job. And again, you got guys like Taron Johnson, Camp Dantzler, who's a reclamation project, very similar to Shane Ray. I don't expect much out of either of them, but who knows? Cam Dantzler, another very lengthy, tall, kind of scrawny guy that, has shown potential at times, but didn't live up to his legacy in Minnesota. I think this is a fun one. And then again, Alex Austin, I think for a lot of people think that maybe he could make himself onto the very back end of the roster, if not the practice squad. So
yeah, Alex Austin, very strong first name.
I'm glad that's your takeaway, Alex. Thank you.
I love your analysis.
Moving on, we've got our safety group, which is intriguing because, ladies and gentlemen, Damar Hamlin, and I'm sure this is very fun for you too, being there with him. Damar Hamlin, who is the talk of the town. Every time you turn the TV on, and rightfully so, he is everywhere. The guy's getting the media around like you've never seen. There's some fun names in here. Dean Marlowe coming back last season. Saran Neal, who's been a tried and true Bills player forever. Zane Anderson, one of the first free agents we have. And then something I meant to bring up before, we haven't seen Tre'Davious White with Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer, and Von Miller on the field at the same time. Yeah. It hasn't happened yet. If Von Miller starts week 1, which I don't suspect, we have a chance of seeing our starting defense together for the first time since they've all been on the roster. So this is a lot of fun. What are some names that you guys are interested in? I know Taylor Rapp is a big one. What are you guys looking at here?
I think for me, it is Taylor Rapp. Like, obviously, he's going to make the roster, all those things. I just want to see how Sean McDermott will implement him into this offense. I mean, he was a starter on the Rams. He's a guy that, he's in the prime of his career. Like he's coming to play. So I'm excited to see how McDermott will use him and utilize him in this defense. I'm also just curious to see how Sean McDermott will be in terms of a play caller. We know, when he was with Carolina, he was very aggressive, and aggressive doesn't always mean blitzing. But I think the Bills could use having, another guy that could throw a counter punch out there, and then Taylor Rapp. And then, Damar Hamlin, his story is just incredible. Now, truly myself, seeing him on a football field makes me incredibly nervous. Like it's just, I give him all the credit in the world, his team of doctors, the Bills staff, all that stuff. But it's like, wow, there's emotion when you think about it. But I think for the Bills also too, like Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde, what they mean to this team and the fact that they'll be back, that cannot be stated enough about what that can mean and that security blanket that can offer.
Yeah, just to touch on Rapp quickly. I'm interested to see how much versatility he has within this defense. He is a specimen out there physically. He is thick from his tree trunk legs, his upper body, and he's a little bit taller, I think, than I expected. So I think his versatility within this defense will be interesting to see. But I think another top story going into training camp, obviously, Damar Hamlin and that first hit that he has in training camp, that first full speed hit. We didn't see him in pads. We saw him out there in a helmet during the spring practice, but we have yet to see him and the rest of the team, for that matter, experience full contact. And that first interaction that he has with another player going full head on is certainly going to be an emotional moment for him. And hopefully he's able to get through that. And it's going to be an emotional moment for a lot of people involved. Going back to being in that stadium in Cincinnati and just not knowing what to do next. You've never been in that situation as a sports reporter, someone who'd reported news, I'm sure, had never been in a situation like that with so many people around and such a drastic situation. It's all been leading up to this point, and I think everybody's waiting for that first hit and to see how he comes away from that and moving forward, how he can kind of have a snowball effect and work toward making this roster, because it's certainly not a sure thing that he will.
Yeah, and speaking about the injuries, the one thing I will say is kind of like you were saying, Jenna, about Tre'Davious White. That's a big thing for a guy like Damar Hamlin, because when it comes to being weary or kind of apprehensive about getting injured again, a lot of players actually get themselves even more injured because they are more conservative with how they go about tackling. They don't go back to the roots with form tackling and protecting themselves. Yeah, the hesitation can actually kill you. So it'll be very intriguing with that.
I don't think, because, and this is just my personal thought process on it, I feel like because it was so traumatic, like he doesn't really remember it. And maybe that's what gives him the ability to want to get back out there, and obviously what football means to him. And he even told us that his doctors encouraged him to get back out there to help with his healing process, feeling like a member of the team, all of that stuff. So I think it's way more mental for all of us that saw it as opposed to him, which is probably, I don't mean to oversimplify it, but I just think for him, it's like, all right, I love football, I want to get back to football. Whereas we all think of what we saw and what the team's reaction was and all of those things.
Yeah, I think it's a good point.
Yeah, and just as a human being, I think it's just one of those things that, like, I think everybody was kind of at a very, I don't know, your breath was taken away. You were at a pause moment where like the whole thing. So like you still have a very visceral, like tangible moment inside of you to then like have him back on the field. You're like kind of clenching, almost like not waiting for it to happen, but hoping to God it doesn't. So it'll be intriguing. But again, like you said, I think Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde, most people did not think Poyer would be back this offseason. The fact that he came back at a lower AAV was, again, Brandon Beane just being remarkable at his job. But the other part about it is Micah Hyde, and I don't think people truly grasp the veracity of how important Micah Hyde is to this defense. But without him after week 2, you could just tell. Jordan Poyer had to do a lot more. His body was banged up. The defense was really kind of, even though it was still good, you could definitely tell that it was showing its weaknesses, showing kind of its flaws.
Yeah.
So I think having both of them out there, and then again, with, potentially having Taylor Rapp out there, knowing that Tremaine is gone, you can get really creative having Taryn and Matt and Taylor Rapp out there and the rest of the defensive backfield. I think they're very they should be very excited. I know McDermott's very excited because these are a lot of guys that can play press man, but can also get right up in your face and play super physical football, which is, I know, something that Sean McDermott's defense is predicated on. So
Sean McDermott's clapping to that.
I love that meme of him with the big hands.
I love it. It's so funny.
It's one of my favorite things ever.
Burger King should, the Burger King hands. They should have like a Sean McDermott Burger King hands, just huge clappers. Yeah, that'd be fun. Moving on, we got our defensive ends. A group that obviously starting off with Von Miller, big time signing with Leonard Floyd, a guy that most people didn't see coming. We knew we were going to add something. Leonard Floyd, a guy that had 9 sacks over the past 3 years. And then my personal kind of hot take that Greg Rousseau is going to be a monster this year. I've said he's going to have 14 to 15 sacks. I think he is.
You said
I would call that a bold take, not an odd take.
14 or 15 sacks. I last year he had 8 sacks in 11 games, and part of it didn't even have Von Miller. He has been in an ascension since at Miami, going from wide receiver and safety to defensive end. His trajectory is sky high. I think that is a guy that is going to set the world ablaze this year, especially having the likes of Von Miller and Leonard Floyd potentially opposite of him. Guys, what are you thinking about this defensive end group?
I just think back to when Von Miller said last year at training camp he was feeding Greg Rousseau gunpowder and gasoline.
That was definitely the quote of the year last year. It came early.
Yeah, Von Miller has a hot mic, but no, I will say I think Bills fans would love to see Greg Rousseau take that step, and I think you saw last year the tea leaves of success. Can he turn it into as much production as you're talking about? Well, the Bills damn sure hope so. I think this group is interesting too. Having Floyd, getting him, I wasn't expecting that, but I think that's a big for the Bills. And I was going through some interviews that Leonard Floyd had, and he talked about how he wants to be the big dog until the big dog gets back, talking about his former teammate and Von Miller. And I think that's nice to have someone that can kind of, help out Greg Rousseau or just help out this defense and help get after the quarterback. I think you look at some of the names on the list, and AJ Epinesa and Boogie Basham, Alex, especially Boogie, really jumps out to me of just the Bills taking so many swings. And does Boogie get cut this year?
In my 53-man projection on the dailynewsonline.com, shameless plug, but I have him getting cut or traded for that matter, one or the other. I don't think he's long for Buffalo. I think his time is running out. He just hasn't shown much progression. He seems like he's the same player as he entered the NFL when they drafted him, in my opinion, way too high in the second round. And people thought he was more NFL ready than Greg Rousseau. And not only was that not true, he has really not that high of an upside. It doesn't appear to be the case. And I think there's something to be said for just cutting bait when at the right time and cutting your losses. And I think the Bills have to do that with Boogie Basham. And you have some talent elsewhere. And you mentioned Shane Ray earlier, and I kind of raised my eyebrows on my 53-man projection. That was kind of my switch off there. I have Shane Ray making it and Boogie Basham not making it. But then again, it could be Kingsley Jonathan. It could be somebody else making it. Who knows? But I'm just basically what I'm trying to say. I'm not high on Boogie Basham. I think he's not long for Buffalo. His time's running out, and I think the Bills would behoove them to cut bait with him.
Yeah, and like you guys were saying, Brandon Beane truly needs to prove that he knows what to do on the defensive line, because to this point, I mean, it's been a question. Obviously, Greg Rousseau is a feather in his cap, and he's been a really quite a revelation, especially for being a draft or a pick that was drafted so late. But then, like you were saying, Jenna, a lot of swings, a lot of misses. Yeah. And at this point, we really need to see what becomes of them. Having a guy like Leonard Floyd, if you could have Leonard Floyd, Von Miller, and Greg Rousseau rotating and coming off the edge, that's a quarterback's worst nightmare and an offensive coordinator's absolute nightmare, because they have to figure out how to kind of deal with us. And again, that's another thing, like with the secondary, once Von Miller went down, the secondary was in trouble. They just couldn't get after the quarterback. Our pressure rate went from 8th to 29th. big drop off in terms of production, but even bigger drop off just in terms of being able to actually impact the game. I think this year, potentially, you could see an even bigger change in philosophy with Sean McDermott and just how he likes to run his defense. I think you're still going to see a 4-man front, but it could be impacted by the fact that you're going to see defensive backs causing pressure, which will help. And then moving into our next group, these guys are going to be impacted by guys like Poona Ford and our defensive tackle group. Obviously, some pretty common names. We didn't see a huge group turnover, but you did see Ed Oliver get the bag this year.
Yeah,
kind of get the bag. And then us bringing Poona Ford, who
One of
a lot
those
of people are
little,
incredibly high on.
it's like one of those little newspaper bags.
Yes, exactly. The ones that I use to clean up my dog's crap in the backyard. They're
There you
fantastic. But moving into this group, guys, what sticks out with you? Is there anybody that's very interesting or think that you potentially could see on the roster?
Well, I have Eli Anku making the final 53, and I have Tim Settle, them cutting bait with him as well. I think he was a disappointment last year. Had some opportunities, dealt with some injury trouble as well. Never really took hold in this defense. And like I said with Basham, not really the same circumstance, but when something doesn't work out, I think there's just something to be said for moving on and giving somebody else an opportunity. It's not really beneficial to keep running the same thing out there expecting different results. I think it's time to give somebody else an opportunity, whether that be Anku, whether that be somebody else, while Jordan Phillips is most likely going to begin the season on the PUP list. Who knows? But I think they need to do a little shifting there. You bring in Poona Ford, you re-sign Ed Oliver, Daquan Jones. You're hoping he can be available in the biggest games of the season as he wasn't last year. But I think it's just time to move on from Tim Settle, maybe give somebody else an opportunity there and see what they can do with the opportunity.
I will say with Tim Settle, like the dead cap, I think could impact maybe their decision making there. But I mean, I agree with Alex. Like you wanted more out of him. You wanted him to be a presence, and he really wasn't that last year. I think this group, what shocks me, not shocks me, but like Daquan Jones was such a big piece, an unexpected guy that like the Bills really missed when he was out of the lineup. So I think that's someone that I didn't really expect to have that much of an impact. And then going into this year, can he stay healthy and can he be what he was last year? I think that would absolutely help out Buffalo. And then Ed Oliver, you got paid. I want to see him play to the level like we all kind of have expected. He was a former first-round draft pick. I think he was picked, 8th overall, something like that. I can't remember exactly. But, can he got paid. Can he play to the level that I think Bills fans expect him to? Yeah, also, though, sidebar, I do love Ed. I love his antics. I love the riding the horse and
he's just hilarious.
He's so funny. He really is.
He kind of mumbles sometimes and you got to like listen close, but he is one true character, that's for sure.
Yeah, he's got the scooter at camp. He'll ride the scooter around.
Yeah. Great guy.
Again, like you guys are saying, and I don't want to echo it too much. Definitely a group with potential upside. If Jordan Phillips can even stay on the field, I think that's one that the Bills could be relying on. I mean, you saw at the beginning of the season when he flashed, he was very impactful for this defense. He just needs to stop dolphin diving and breaking his body every other week. Tim Settle, Jenna, like you were saying, I think the $5 million dead cap hit is going to be interesting to see what they do there. I know they did it with OJ Howard last year. I don't know if they want to do it this year just because that group got really banged up to the end of the season. I mean, Daquan didn't even play in the Bengals game, and you saw what impact that had.
Yeah.
Poona Ford, man, I think that's a guy that could be tremendously impactful for Ed Oliver's sake, and even for the defensive ends. I mean, the big thing that you saw was outside of Daquan Jones, there just wasn't a lot of impact on the defensive line. Ed Oliver's high ankle sprain after week 2 was it really was a detriment to his game and the way he wanted to play. And, with his burst being, kind of hugely part of it, what makes him successful, that kind of stopped him from actually being able to take that next step. Obviously he hasn't lived up to expectation, but he got paid. So we'll see what happens this year. I think the group is for the most part settled. I think Eli Anku has been a revelation when he's been out there. I don't suspect he'll make the roster. I think he's a practice squad guy that they'll bring in, here and there prospectively. But again, another great group. I think Daquan Jones, if he was a little younger, would already have gotten an extension. But I think he's 33 years old, so I think that's a little tough. But they do need to, maybe if it's Puna Ford that they bring in after this year, I think there's a lot of going on in terms of what they can do or, what potential this has. So moving into the linebackers group, guys, the big talk of the offseason, Tremaine Edmonds, a guy that Mr. Barrel trusted, drafted at 19 years old, that everybody kept seeing the upside for, eventually got paid. A lot of fans were disappointed that we didn't pay him and we paid Ed Oliver. I think it was, we were kind of shoehorned into a situation where you were either going to, pay him at the wrong time or overpay him at the worst time. So I think this group is to be expected. It's a group of maybe the biggest question mark. Who's going to step up next to Matt Milano and take over that, middle linebacker job?
This is going to be so interesting to watch play out at camp, because you have Terrell Bernard, you have Tyrell Dotson, you have Dorian Williams. I mean, what about Balen Spector or AJ Klein? I don't really expect him to be in the mix, but there's such a big hole that Tremaine Edmonds is leaving behind. And I feel like for the Bills, like, it worked out well, because the Bills let things play out, and I think they really loved being like, the Bears just gave him too much money and we couldn't price ourselves with them. Like, I think that kind of worked out well for Buffalo. But who plays beside Matt Milano is, Alex, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think you touched on it there toward the end. I think Brandon Beane touched on it. I think it was either before or during the draft. They didn't seem like, obviously you want to keep a player that's as talented and the measurements of Tremaine Edmonds, but I think they were kind of looking for a different player at that position, kind of a more matchup style linebacker in coverage, more so like a Terrell Bernard, a Dorian Williams, somebody with that capability. And kind of like I said with Kaiir Elam, I think they want Terrell Bernard to win that job. I think all these guys are going to be given every opportunity, but being drafted in the 3rd round last year and being given the opportunity to call the plays during the spring, I think he has everything they're looking for in terms of that matchup linebacker, able to drop back and pick up a running back out of the backfield, maybe a tight end streaking across the formation, and he can come up and hit. So I think his versatility and I think he's going to be the style linebacker, I can say that at least, what they're looking for in this new-ish Sean McDermott defense.
I will say, I think the Bills want to give the position to a younger guy. They want to do a draft pick. They want it to be Terrell Bernard, or they want it to be Dorian Williams. But last year when Tremaine was out, it was Tyrell Dotson in there. And so is that a guy that, if they feel like Bernard and Williams don't win the job, do they give it to Tyrell Dotson? I think that's like the break glass in case of emergency option. But that is definitely going to be something. I think all these guys are going to get reps and a decent amount. And Sean McDermott has talked about the competition. And first of all, you just know Sean McDermott loves like all these storylines of like a guy like Tyrell Dotson, like finally getting his opportunity, and all these guys having to earn it, and the competition bringing out the best in one another, all that stuff. But that, I think, will be highly talked about during training camp, and for good reason. But I think, the Bills want to have their guy when they're leaving. Like, they want to know who they have, and that's obviously a huge position in the defense and what they can do. And it's going to be weird not having Tremaine Edmonds back there. I know a lot of Bills fans thought he could have played better in certain moments, and there was definitely times that I was calling for that as well. But we talk about a safety blanket, and Tremaine Edmonds was that. Maybe you wanted more flash plays, but you knew what you were going to get.
Yeah, I wrote my projection. I think if Tyrell Dotson or AJ Klein ends up with the starting job, I think things didn't really go that well during training camp. But.
Yeah, I think it is that like you're talking about. I think it's like the break glass in case of emergency. You have a guy that can go out there, but you want it to be the guys you drafted.
And you definitely need to decide on this position, I think, before training camp is through. It's not like offensive line or maybe cornerback where you can rotate a couple guys through. If you're going to have a guy calling the defense beside Matt Milano. I think you need a little bit of consistency there.
Agreed.
Yeah, I'll tell you, the one guy I'm actually interested in keeping my eye on is Balin Spector. Coming out of Clemson, a guy that's got a nose for the ball, a guy that's got great instincts, and really a big-time leader when he played, over in Clemson, who unfortunately hasn't really produced very many linebackers of note or worth for the NFL. I think it's a guy that, albeit he's only 6 foot, could prove to be a guy that, maybe could step up and push for the actual starting role. I agree. I think you're, more than likely going to see Terrell Bernard or Dorian Williams in that spot. I think Bills fans would behoove themselves to have Dorian Williams. So, that pick doesn't look like another wasted third rounder. But then again, you're looking the same thing with Terrell Bernard that we're looking at with Kyer Elam and Christian Benford and that whole thing of another year, another wasted pick. So, it's kind of that cutting off your nose to spite your face. Depending on who you pick, you're going to make a Bills fan mad. I think this is going to be a fun battle. There's a lot of different, avenues here. I've even heard, and I don't know if you guys can speak to this, Tyler Matakevich got some first team reps at middle linebacker for a hot minute. So,
yeah, and I don't think he's in the running.
It'll be intriguing.
Still, I think that goes to show you how they're like, we're going to try it.
Right.
We're going to throw everything at the wall and we're going to see.
They're definitely going to throw everything into the fire.
Good sign necessarily, but
no, yeah, and definitely not a good sign if he gets the starting role. Then I have to spell his name every week. That's not going to be an enjoyable aspect.
Yeah, well, I think this is a fun one for us. And then moving on to the final grouping, I put Reggie Gilliam because I know people say fullbacks are people too.
I don't know if Reggie Gilliam even knows this technical.
Yeah,
Right.
I went back and forth on my way home. My wife, I love my wife. She's the sweetest. She literally wrote out my 53-man roster while we were driving and was kind of going over everything. She's the best. My wife, she's unbelievable. I went back and forth with Reggie. I love Reggie Gilliam. I love what he provides. I love his athleticism. That Titans game, the touchdown he had was unbelievable. He's a willing and able blocker. And, just a guy that for a long time, whether it was Doran Dickerson, who was that H-bag kind of fullback guy, we haven't really had a guy that could provide that, that kind of thump that we need or, help in the running game. My only concern is with the running backs we acquired, does Gilliam become redundant? Do you need Gilliam to lead block for Latavius Murray? And especially with you're seeing these battles with these positions that, when I did mine earlier, I got to 51 and I was like, I don't know what to do. I don't know who to keep. I don't know what these last couple of ones are tough. And I hate to say it, but I think Reggie Gilliam might be, I know he does a little bit of everything, but you guys tell me what's your thoughts.
I think I actually like spin 0481's comment. Gilliam, running back, fullback, tight end, wide receiver, special teams are like he has so much versatility, and I think the Bills really love that about him. But does that mean he stays? I don't know, but I think he's made himself very marketable in what he can do in terms of all the ways he can be used in the lineup. I don't know though. You're right. That's a guy where you're like, I could see him being cut. I could see him being on the roster. It's just, I think that's someone that either way, again, it's like going back to the Quentin Morris. I won't be surprised either way.
Right. He's just the classic Swiss Army knife. He can do it all, and you can plug and play him in so many different situations, and he contributes on special teams. I think he makes the roster, but like you guys are saying, he's certainly not a player where you're like, oh, Reggie Gilliam got cut.
Yeah.
So
well, there will be people that will be absolutely heartbroken
and God bless
about the
them.
idea.
Yes.
Yeah, we got to have those people. Those are the same people like Dan Fates who think s'mores are disgusting. But
yeah, I'm not sure about that take.
You think s'mores are disgusting?
Yeah, you got to get
your
tweet that.
He did tweet
that.
that.
It's so funny. He's on vacation and he's been tweeting more than I have.
Can't get away. He's pumped for training camp. He's getting ready. He's getting his reps in.
He's firing off his take. His thumbs are ready. Yeah,
for sure. And here's another thing: this might be one of the first training camps in a long time that you don't have a kicker or punter battle. I know people like Joe Biscaglia are crying tears of crocodile tears about no kicker battle.
A couple years ago.
Yeah, I wrote
unfortunate.
in my column. I said, enjoy the status quo. This is one position you don't have to worry about at all.
Whereas Dan is wrong. I like this one from RJ. There we go.
Yeah, we
Where
have
is the
mugs.
Dan is wrong side of the mug?
We have mugs on Buffalo Plus's store, and it's one side is Dan is right, and then the other side is Dan is wrong, and we'll just flip them according. But I designed the mug, so I made it so the right hand, if you're holding it with the right hand, it says Dan is wrong.
Perfect. Perfect.
You just got to get Dan one that both sides
Or just Dan is wrong.
Or when you put coffee in it, the right turns to wrong. With the
I do like that. That is pretty funny. No, also just a note, Reed Ferguson, the longest tenured Bill. Like, dude has been around
Real
for
master.
a long time. Yeah.
And on top of it, I believe the stat came out the other day. He hasn't had one bad snap in his entire
knock
Buffalo
on wood right
career.
now for Reed.
Right. I have brick. I was a long snap. I was a long snapper in high school, by the way. It's quick side note. I could fling that thing back there.
Is that just a thing? Like I don't think every team has like one, like Garrison Sanborn. Every team has like a long snapper that's just here forever, and they're like, I don't even know if people know where they are. They just show up every season ready to work, and that's it.
Right. I think it's one of those positions you don't want to think too much about. Once you get a good one, just stick with it.
Yeah, that's fair. I don't blame them.
That being said, guys, let's finish off with one last thing. Who is the one player you two are most interested in come training camp? Somebody you're going to be keeping your eyes on?
That's a good question. If I had to pick one, I would just say Deontay Hardy. I just want to see the speed. Like, we've seen a little bit in OTAs and mini camps, but like, just to get out there, he's small, but I just want to see what that looks like because we've heard so much about it.
Like I said earlier, I think the main thing I'm looking forward to out of camp is just to see DeMar Hamlin take or dole out that first hit.
That's a good one too, yeah.
During training camp, and just to see how he comes away from that interaction and whether or not that impacts him moving forward or anything like that. God willing, it doesn't, because he was contributing last year before he went out. He wasn't really having an all-pro Pro Bowl season, but he was certainly a contributor, and I'd like to see him get back there.
Yeah, I also like Rick's comment of Dalton Kincaid.
Yeah,
that's going to be a fun one.
Seems like a good place to start.
Yeah, he's a player that I think people are going to be really happy with him or disappointed. I don't think there's going to be much in between with how people view him.
That is boom or bust. I'm curious how the Bills will actually, if they will use him in the way that we've all talked about. Like,
right.
Will they implement him right away?
I think the one guy I'm going to be keeping my eyes on is Spencer Brown. I think, if this offensive line could finally gel, if we, and you saw last year going into camp, Roger Saffold was in an accident. Spencer Brown was still coming back from injury. I don't think it was till one of the last few practices before the red and blue practice that they had their starting five or the prospective started five together, kind of getting some cohesion. So I think the ability of having Spencer Brown, if he, in fact, after the surgery, which Tommy Doyle seems to think that Spencer Brown's going to have a banner year, if you can get an offensive line going with those two guard spots in place, you already know what Morse is. If he can stay healthy and Dion another year back from his lingering COVID stuff,
yeah,
Josh Allen could have, a year for the record books. You saw last year with the UCL injury, he matched his prior year, which people thought was an MVP season. Last year, they said he regressed. I don't get it. But Spencer Brown, if he can stay healthy, I think this is a guy that you saw in his run blocking ability has been surprisingly good. His pass blocking has been tremendously bad. If we can finish this up, we're in for a good place. So. That being said, Jenna, Alex, I appreciate you coming on tonight 1 week before camp.
Thank you.
I think Jenna's analysis beat mine out, but the fact that I held this phone up for an hour and 10 minutes, I deserve.
You get the MVP. Well, I will
MVP.
gladly hand that to you. Thank you for having us.
Yes,
though.
thank you, truly.
Where can everybody find your unbelievable content?
If you are interested in my work, you can check out the BuffaloPlus YouTube channel. If you're local to Rochester, you can watch us on 13 Wham ABC. And then if you go to my Twitter, it's my handle is right there. I do not tweet as much as Dan Fates, so don't expect that out of me. But we're always posting.
You get some good ones out though, Jenna.
I try. I have a little bit of snark in me.
A little
yeah.
might be underrating it.
A little, yeah, just a wee bit. But yeah, we're always posting stuff to our YouTube channel, so check it out.
Yeah, I can be found on the dailynewsonline.com. That's where all my columns, my analysis, anything you want to find Bills related. My Twitter, Instagram, and now you have to be on Threads. My handle is just my name, Alex Brasky. So tune in there, and more to come, I'm sure, as the Daily News gets more and more in depth with our coverage of the Bills.
Love it.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for my Blue Sky invite. I'll tell you, I couldn't be more appreciative of you guys coming here, just going through all this. I know a lot of people were excited just to kind of see what this roster is going to kind of break down to. And for a very, very talented Bills roster, we should be in for a real treat. Guys, if you're watching and you haven't gone to Bills training camp, I know it's been tough. The training camp tickets are just a real hot item. Try to get there. It is a lot of fun. You get real up close and personal with some really, really cool people. And even the coaches, Brandon Bean walks around. You get a picture with him. Well worth your time. And if you're in Rochester, go get a garbage plate, I guess. Whatever.
Go to Pittsford Dairy and get ice cream.
Oh yeah, go to Pittsford Dairy.
Free plug. Wow.
Really good ice cream.
I will.
Let's hope Damar Hamlin's first collision is not with Jenna on the sideline.
No, we are both hoping that.
You know, we've seen whether, like we're talking about the Damar Hamlin situation, things can change really in a moment's notice. So if you haven't talked to somebody you love in a while, give them a call. Tell them you love them. I promise it's worth your time. Other than that, guys, make sure you subscribe to Cover One Pass. We'll give you all the great content. Like this video, subscribe, turn on the notifications, and the lifeblood of all our content creators. If you like what we do, share this, let somebody know, and tell them to go watch our beautiful faces. But again, I appreciate it. My name's Thomas DeLoss. You can find me on Twitter at @ThomasDeLoss. I'm here every Thursday night, 9 p.m. on Cover One. We will see you next week for the start of Buffalo Bills training camp. Go Bills.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bills make me wanna